وصحبه ومن والاه بعد. The topic that was assigned to me is a biography of Ibn Taymiyyah. We really don't have time for a long biography. But before I begin, and I will summarize a few aspects of his life that I think are important, I wanted to begin by talking a little bit about scholars and scholarship, and about venerating and looking up to scholars. There's no doubt, brothers and sisters, that the Prophet ﷺ told us that there's one category of his ummah that are the inheritors of the prophets. He said, Al-Ulama warathatul anbiya. The scholars are the inheritors of the prophets. So our religion indeed does mandate that we respect our ulama, we look up to them, we do whatever we can to help them and whatnot. And it is very important, it is a part of our religion that we give respect to the people who deserve respect. At the same time, we have to be careful and not go to extremes. We have just 20 minutes or so, inshallah, even less than that. I just want to summarize some of the main salient features of the life and times of Ibn Taymiyyah and how we can benefit from such a personality. Now, Ibn Taymiyyah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on him and exalt his ranks. Ibn Taymiyyah is one of the most famous scholars in the 14.5 centuries of Islam. And everybody who studies Islam is aware of Ibn Taymiyyah. He's one of the few people whose names you have to know. Now, like every person who is so famous or whatnot, you either love him or you hate him. He has a lot of enemies. He has people that has to deal with him. But nobody remains neutral. Nobody remains basically in a vacuum about Ibn Taymiyyah. His name is essentially, along with all of the greatest ulama of Islam, you cannot understand Islam. Even if you disagree with Ibn Taymiyyah, you cannot understand Islam without having a knowledge of what he wrote and either supporting or opposing it. And so much can be said. But to summarize, Ibn Taymiyyah was born in a very, very volatile point of Islamic history. We think our situation is bad. Honestly, Ibn Taymiyyah was born in a much worse situation. He was born during the invasion of the Mongols. In our 14.5 centuries of Islam, I would estimate, or I would guess, or I would extrapolate, there were 2 crises after the death of the Prophet. Obviously, that is the biggest crisis, but after the death of the Prophet, there were 2 crises that literally shook the ummah to the core. There has been no comparison to those 2 political crises. It altered the shape of the ummah permanently. The first of them, and the greater of them, was the Mongol invasion. When none other than Genghis Khan invaded the Muslim lands, and then he and his children and his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren, for over 100 years, the Mongol invasion spanned various aspects until finally, in the 13th century CE, Ulama Khan made his way to the capital Baghdad, and he destroyed the entire city, and he brought an end to the Abbasid Caliphate, and he burnt the largest library in the world, and he massacred, it is said, up to 1 million people. Now in those days, you didn't throw the mother of all bombs as our country does. You didn't just throw a nuclear bomb as in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If you wanted to kill people, there was one way to do it. How did you do it? Via the sword. So can you imagine, not that it's any less barbaric, because killing people is killing people, but when you throw the mother of all bombs, instantaneously tens of thousands of people die. When you have to kill those tens of thousands with swords, just imagine that. That's what happened in Baghdad. Families lined up for days, because it's going to take a while to get to your turn. Babies, mothers, children, women, every single Muslim of the city is killed. That is Genghis Khan. That is his grandson, Ulama Khan. Ibn Taymiyyah is born essentially right after that. Okay? And his family is fleeing for their lives, and they seek refuge in Damascus, where Ibn Taymiyyah is born in the year 661 AH. 661 AH, because his father and his parents have fled the invasion of the Mongols. Now, Ibn Taymiyyah came from a scholarly line. His father and his grandfather were great ulama, so he grew up along with his brothers. He had 3 brothers. All of them studied ilm. All of them became ulama, but Ibn Taymiyyah essentially became head and shoulders far above them for many reasons. Of them was that Ibn Taymiyyah truly was what is called a polymath. What is a polymath? A polymath is somebody who is an expert or a specialist in more than one field. And polymaths are very rare in human history. How many engineers do you know that are also practicing doctors? How many lawyers do you know that are also architects? Hardly any. Because to specialize in a field requires years and decades of study. To be a polymath is an exception. Ibn Taymiyyah was one such polymath. He studied multiple fields and he mastered multiple fields. He truly was a jack of all trades and a master of all of them as well. And this is something well attested by even his enemies, even those who didn't like him. They attested that he had photographic memory. So he would read. And as he read, he would memorize and comprehend. So Ibn Taymiyyah then began to write at a young age as well. And when he was a teenager, 17 years old, he began to write. And Ibn Taymiyyah lived a very simple, frugal life. He never did too much business. He never got married. He never had children. So he dedicated his time, his entire life, he dedicated to knowledge, learning, teaching, and writing. And in our Islamic history, only 2 or 3 people have written essentially entire, hundreds of volumes of books, such as Al-Tabari, such as As-Suyuti, and such as Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah has written over 100 volumes in today's published material. Many of you know I specialize in Ibn Taymiyyah. My PhD was on Ibn Taymiyyah. By the way, I finished my PhD. The introducer said I'm still doing it. Alhamdulillah, many years ago I finished the PhD. So my PhD was on Ibn Taymiyyah as well. And as far as I know, I have pretty much every book of Ibn Taymiyyah that has been printed, unless something has come out very recently. And the books of Ibn Taymiyyah take up an entire shelf of my library. Literally, volumes and volumes and volumes, entire shelf. One person is producing that much material. There is nobody that I am aware of that produced as much material that is printed in our times as Ibn Taymiyyah. So, he has scholarship, he has authorship, he teaches as well. He produced a galaxy of ulama. All you need to do, our scholar said, if you want to look at the level of a person, look at the level of his students. When you see his students, you'll see the teacher. Ibn Taymiyyah produced a galaxy of ulama. Ibn al-Qayyim was the main student of Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Kathir, the famous Mufassir, is also a student of Ibn Taymiyyah. Al-Dhahabi, the famous historian, is a student of Ibn Taymiyyah. And you have others as well that perhaps many of you might not be aware of their names, but essentially Ibn Taymiyyah produced an entire madrasa of scholars simply because he taught a group and influenced so many of them. I want to mention a number of things that are very important about people like Ibn Taymiyyah and what we can benefit from. Firstly, you don't get to that level without a healthy dosage of spirituality. Knowledge in Islam is not just book knowledge, it's also spirituality. And Ibn Taymiyyah was somebody who clearly was a very spiritual man. He enjoyed a close relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibn al-Qayyim, his famous student, remarks that despite all of the problems that Ibn Taymiyyah suffered, I always found him to be optimistic and joyous. It was a pleasure to be in his company. Ibn al-Qayyim says it was never he's moaning and groaning. He always had an optimistic view of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whenever we would feel sad because of his trials, we would go to him and he would cheer us up because of what's happening to him, right? They would feel sad that their teacher is being put in jail, their teacher is this and that, and Ibn Taymiyyah would cheer them up. And Ibn Qayyim remarks that one day I visited Ibn Taymiyyah after Fajr and he was doing his dhikr, an hour or two after Fajr, he was doing his dhikr. And so I sat waiting for him to finish. Then Ibn Taymiyyah turned around and said, "This is my morning meal for my soul. This is my breakfast for my ruh. And if I don't have my breakfast, I can't work throughout the day." See, dhikr for an hour or two after Fajr, Quran, dhikr, ibadah. Then he just says, "I'm sorry I was late, but I needed to have my breakfast. If I don't have my breakfast, I'm not going to be able to do the chores that I need to do." This is what you call like an ilm. It has to implement into amal as well. And one time Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned to Ibn Qayyim a very famous phrase that I've said many, many times, that Ibn Taymiyyah said to his student Ibn Qayyim that dhikr to the heart is like water to a fish. Dhikr to the heart is like water to a fish. So if you remove the fish from water, what's going to happen? Similarly, if you remove the heart from dhikr, what's going to happen? So constantly dhikr of Allah, dua of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Ibn Qayyim, towards the end of his life, Ibn Taymiyyah was put into jail, as we're going to mention in a little while. And Ibn Qayyim was put along with him. And Ibn Qayyim said that I would wake up at night and I would hear him in sajda, making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the last year of his life. The last year, he doesn't know this yet, but it's going to be the last year. And what is Ibn Taymiyyah praying for? Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik. Oh Allah, help me to do dhikr, help me to thank you for all that you've given me, and help me to worship you. So even as Ibn Taymiyyah is chained up and imprisoned and about to die, he's asking Allah, oh Allah, always make me thankful for all that you've given me. And this is in the middle of the night, waking up for Salat al-Tahajjud. And once when Ibn Taymiyyah was about to go to jail, and they petitioned, or they asked him to go to jail, they told him to go to jail, Ibn Taymiyyah said again to Ibn Qayyim, although this is private conversation, which Ibn Qayyim later on mentioned after his Shaykh died, he turned to Ibn Qayyim and he said that, what can my enemies do with me? What can they do with me? My Jannah is in my chest. Wherever I go, I can feel the pleasures of Jannah because I can enjoy the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they said, Ibn Taymiyyah said, if they imprison me, this is an opportunity for seclusion to worship Allah. And if they kill me, this is an opportunity to become a shaheed. And if they tell me to leave the land and go somewhere else, this is an opportunity for me for tourism and going and exploring other cities. What can they do? If they imprison me, the prime opportunity for me to worship Allah without the distractions of the world. If they kill me, they've granted me shahada. And if they exiled me, okay, I'll take it as a tourist, go and tour the land, alhamdulillah, ardullahi wasi'ah. In other words, there's always this sense of optimism, of hope, of courage. Along with this, there are plenty of stories that demonstrate Ibn Taymiyyah's bravery. Ibn Taymiyyah once remarked again to Ibn Qayyim, he said that anybody who fears a creation other than Allah Azza wa Jalla, anybody who fears anything, indicates there's a disease in his heart. He doesn't know Allah. If he knew Allah, he would never fear anyone else. And Ibn Taymiyyah demonstrated that multiple times. In one infamous incident, there was this extreme mystical group that would call themselves the volatile. And what they would do is they would perform bizarre feats in public. They would jump into a fire, and they would, show themselves, the fire does not touch me. And they would do other things of this nature. And then they would ask the people for money and ask them to join, their movement and whatnot. So this was this, bizarre cult spreading in Damascus. And they would do these bizarre stunts and feats. And they would walk on coal and whatnot. And Ibn Taymiyyah challenged them. And he said, let us, both of us, your Shaykh and me, let us both do the exact same thing. Jump into the fire, walk on coal, do this and that, but I have one condition. One condition. And that is, the both of us, we have to take a full ghusl before we do what we're doing. Because Ibn Taymiyyah realized, what are they doing? What trick are they doing? They have some type of paste, they have some type of material that is protecting the skin. And they would then jump into the fire and then jump out unharmed. They would walk on coal and it would not hurt them. So Ibn Taymiyyah wanted to show the people these are frauds. And he demonstrated it by challenging their Shaykh to a duel. And the duel was, we'll both do the exact, I too will jump into the fire, along with you, no problem. I have to tawakkul in Allah, but there's one condition, that you have to do a ghusl and I will also do a ghusl, thorough ghusl. Right? We're going to go to in those days there was what's called the bathhouse, right? When you wanted to do a proper ghusl, they would go there, and there wasn't private, showers in the houses, right? So there was a bathhouse over there. Go there, we will do the ghusl, and then we will come and jump into the fire together. And obviously, the Shaykh did not do the duel of the other group, and Ibn Taymiyyah won the debate because of the absence of the other person. There are many other stories as well. Perhaps amazing, jaw-dropping story in the entire life of Ibn Taymiyyah deals with when the grandson, or the great-grandson of Genghis Khan invaded Damascus. So remember, the grandson of Genghis Khan had destroyed Baghdad, and then the great-grandson is now making his way to Damascus. This is a generation later. This is a different time. And that great-grandson, his name was Ghazan. His name was Ghazan. Now, a very interesting point here. Ghazan, so subhanAllah, very footnote here. When the Mongols invaded, and they began conquering one land after another, the Muslim Ummah thought this is the end, the judgment day. Ya'juj and Ma'juj are coming. That's what they thought. They thought the Mongols were Ya'juj and Ma'juj. And they thought that Dajjal is going to come right after that. And they thought Isa is going to come down any second. They thought that's the end of time. This was literally 900 years ago. Okay, that's what they thought. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected the Ummah as He will always protect the Ummah. And two things happened that stopped the destruction, the Mongol destruction of the Muslim Ummah. The first of them was a small unknown dynasty in the very fringes of the Ummah, in a province that was never made. It was always a tertiary province. It was always a province that wasn't considered a main province, and that is Egypt. And the dynasty is that of the Mamluks. The Mamluk dynasty managed to take on the challenge of the Mongols, and for the first time in Mongolian history, they defeated the Mongols. So the Mamluks defeated the Mongols in the famous battle of Ain Jalut, and you have Allah and Baybaras and others of that era. They defeated the Mongols. Then the miracle of miracles happens. If that isn't miraculous enough, another miracle happened. And that is the Mongols who invaded Muslim lands accepted Islam. The Mongols accepted Islam. And their descendants were then Muslim. So the whole dynamics changed. Because now they are Muslim. And by the way, from the Mongols, we get the Indian Mamluks. Because not the Mamluks, the Mughals. Because who are the Mughals? The Mughals are the descendants of the Mongols. And when Babur came to India, the Indians thought, oh my God, the Mongols are coming in. So they called them the Mongols. And the Indians called the Mongols the Mughals. So the Mughal dynasty is coming from the term Mongols, because Babur and of course Akbar and all of them were direct descendants of Genghis Khan. Also Tamerlane, also these were descendants of the Mongols. But the point being that the Mongols eventually converted to Islam, and they founded an Ilkhanate Sultanate. They founded a Sultanate in Muslim lands. So Ghazan was actually a convert to Islam. Now, although he has converted to Islam, his actions are very bad. Torture, killing, pillaging, stealing, whatnot. So Ghazan is nominally a Muslim. He's praying, he's fasting Ramadan, right? He has Islamic ulama with him, but his actions are still Mongolian, right? Following his great-grandfather. So Ghazan is now camped outside of Damascus. And he is threatening to invade Damascus and raze the city to the ground. People began fleeing Damascus. They began running away. And Ibn Taymiyyah stands up in the masjid after the salah. And he begins to give a powerful khutbah. Do not flee your houses and lands. This is now a jihad that we have to fight against Ghazan. And he encouraged the people to stay. Then he took an entourage of scholars to meet Ghazan. He gathered the ulama that were willing to come. Many were too scared to come. He gathered the ulama that were willing to come. And he then marched to the army and demanded an audience. He said, we are the ulama of Damascus. We demand to see your emperor Ghazan. So eventually, room is made for them, and they are allowed to enter the golden tent. They had the special tent that Ghazan would travel in. They were allowed to enter the tent, and Ibn Taymiyyah led the ulama. So now you have the emperor of the Mongols. He's supposed to be a Muslim technically. And you have Ibn Taymiyyah, and you have the entourage. And everybody knew the ferocity of the Mongols. Everybody knew how evil and barbaric they are. If you study history, hardly any dynasty has been more barbaric than the Mongols. They literally killed millions of people by the sword. They were the first dynasty as well to pile up the heads of the bodies in pyramids. They would literally have tens of thousands of heads in pyramids outside of the cities to send warning signals to the other cities. So Ibn Taymiyyah marches in, and he marches straight to Ghazan on his throne. Straight up to Ghazan. So much so that his knees were almost touching the knees of Ghazan. And he raised his voice and he began yelling in the face of Ghazan that you claim to be a Muslim, and you claim to believe in Allah and the Messenger, and you claim that you pray and you fast, and yet you rape and you pillage and you steal and you do this and you do that. Have you no fear of Allah? Your own grandfather, meaning Genghis Khan, who was a pagan, he did not do as bad things as you are doing, and he mentioned certain things that Ghazan had done. Now, the ulama with Ibn Taymiyyah were absolutely terrified. One of them said that I gathered my cloth and I shielded it away because I was certain that Ghazan would give the command to chop off Ibn Taymiyyah's head, and I didn't want his blood to come splatter on my thobe. So I gathered my thobe and I turned it the other way. This is how frightful the scenario had become. And all the while, Ghazan is lowering his head and listening, and he's not even responding. Even his advisors were shocked. This is not the Ghazan that they knew. The angry, the tyranny, the emperor. Even the advisors were shocked. And afterwards, Ghazan invited the scholars to a feast. All of them ate. This is luxurious food, except Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah refused to eat one morsel of food, one kernel of rice, one luqma of meat. He refused to eat it. When Ghazan said, aren't you going to eat? To his face, Ibn Taymiyyah said, and how do you expect me to eat? Because I know that these animals have been stolen from Muslim lands, and the wheat has been robbed from here, and this has been there. You want me to eat of haram food? I have no need of it. Straight to his face, he told him, I cannot eat of this haram food, because you and your army are living off of plundering, the innocent Muslims. Afterwards, when Ibn Taymiyyah left, his advisors asked Ghazan, why didn't you give the command to kill him? We've never seen anybody treat you this way, and you just respond with nothing. And Ghazan said that a genuine fear of him entered my heart. Like when somebody is so courageous, somebody is so fearless, even the powerful begin to fear him. And so Ghazan actually did not invade Damascus. SubhanAllah. That powerful khutbah or lecture, straight to his face, and Ibn Taymiyyah had no fear for his life, because again, this is a man who really does not care what is going to happen to him. He literally believes my Jannah is in my chest, as he said. They can't do anything to me. And we can go on and on, time is limited. Let me just finish up here by saying that along with this, Ibn Taymiyyah was also unfortunately imprisoned and tortured by some of the Muslim rulers of his time. Why? Because he was too popular and too powerful. The masses loved him so much, and the rulers are always threatened when ulama gain popularity. Look around you in the modern world today. Some of the most famous ulama have been imprisoned by their own Islamic or pseudo-Islamic regimes. Some of the most famous ulama have been killed or silenced by their own pseudo-Muslim governments. This is the reality of the world that we live in. Why? Because the ulama truly are the inheritors of the prophets. And no one can rile up the masses. No one represents a more powerful threat to the tyrannical regimes across the Muslim world than Islamic scholarship and genuine ulama. So that's why the scholars are always the target of the governments and the illegitimate governments and the repressive regimes. So Ibn Taymiyyah was imprisoned multiple times. 3 times he was put in jail. All of them for the most trivial of issues. They had to hunt for an excuse. In one point they said he's a deviant in theology. In another point they said he gave a fatwa about divorce. SubhanAllah, Ibn Taymiyyah has a position about divorce, right? That when a man says 3 divorces in one sitting, it should count as 1 and not 3. Whatever your position is about it, you're not going to send a man to jail because he has a fatwa about divorce. Think about it, right? That's not the real reason he's in jail. The real reason he's in jail, he's too powerful for the sultans and the kings. They want to silence him. But guess what happens when they throw him in jail? What happens to his popularity? Goes even higher. And such is the way of truth. that you cannot silence the truth in this manner. Until finally, towards the end of his life, he became so powerful and popular, they literally found a fatwa that he gave 20 years ago. 20 years ago, an obscure fatwa that he gave. They disagreed with it. The scholars of his time, some of them were very jealous of him and whatnot, they said, oh, this is wrong, he's did dhulm, this fatwa is incorrect, you have to put him in jail. And so towards the end of his life, the last year of his life, Ibn Taymiyyah was put in jail. And Ibn Qayyim was put along with him. And he mentions that during that last year and a half, Ibn Taymiyyah finished the Quran sometimes 10, 15 times a month. He would read the Quran over and over again. And he wrote some of his finest books until finally, in the last few months, they deprived him of paper and pen. Because they were that scared of Ibn Taymiyyah, they deprived him of paper and pen. And so for the last few months of his life, it was just immersed in pure ibadah and worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Ibn Taymiyyah then finally passed away in the year 748 AH, and 728, excuse me, AH. And when he passed away in the year 728, in the month of Dhul Qa'dah, the entire city of Damascus shut down the next day. There were no shops open. There were no madaris open, no schools open. Everybody wanted to attend the janazah of Ibn Taymiyyah. And people mention in the history of Islam, only 2 such janazahs have taken place that the whole city has shut down. The first of them is Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal in terms of ulama. The first of them is Ahmad ibn Hanbal in the city of Baghdad. When Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal died, the city came to a standstill. And it was probably one of the largest janazas that Islamic history has seen. And the second time was Ibn Taymiyyah, when the city of Damascus came to a standstill to pray janazah over Ibn Taymiyyah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant Ibn Taymiyyah, all of our ulama, a higher rank. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cause each and every one of us to have that ikhlas and that khushu' and that taqwa that ulama should have. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from the fitan, those which are open and those which are secret. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us knowledge that is beneficial, and may Allah grant us to act upon that knowledge. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be resurrected with our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and accompany him in Jannatul Firdaus al-A'la. Wa jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.